All right, so you're in SSA. How long have you been in SSA?
Let's see. Well, I've been in IMPIT Secular Alliance more regularly since last fall.
Okay. So you'd never been to a conference before?
No, this is my first conference.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Nice.
So, and you were there 4 years, and you kind of knew about SSA, but you weren't that involved, I guess, until in the last year.
Yeah, I was really busy with class, and when our chapter would meet would be Fridays at 5, and typically, well, this year it worked out for my schedule, but before it hadn't, so I would drop in a little bit, didn't know everyone that well, but I befriended the president through mutual friends, and I've gotten a lot more involved since then.
Yeah. Was there any trigger for that? Just time?
Really just time, and I've always been...
It wasn't Trump's election?
Oh.
I've heard that as being part of the story of a lot of people.
Yeah.
No. So did you have any kind of religious upbringing at all?
I would say no. My mom's upbringing is actually very interesting because she grew up in the Virgin Islands, went to a Catholic school because usually they will enroll the children in private schools to make sure they get a good education. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it was a Catholic school growing up, but her family was atheist, and she is staunchly atheist. My dad's side of the family, on the other hand, very Italian, very Catholic. So for me, when I see them on holidays occasionally, it's a little bit of a culture shock for me. My dad isn't very religious, or if he does have beliefs, he keeps them private, doesn't really share that with me very much. So
you wouldn't have grown up thinking, I know my dad believes in God, or you would have just assumed he believed in God?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
So
you just weren't sure?
Yeah.
I don't recall having a lot of religious discussions with my dad.
Yeah, it's just not something he really...
But there were assumptions I kind of knew were there.
Yeah.
So you obviously were aware of people believing in God all around you.
Oh, for sure. My family, they haven't really outright pressured me into being Christian, but they would...
The extended paternal side, you mean?
Yeah. Like there would be things that they would say that would obviously lean in that direction.
Yeah.
Always prayer before dinner. I did receive a cross necklace for Christmas in middle school, which made my mother very unhappy. But so I think they're well-meaning, but I'm not around them enough for whatever pressure to really affect me much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so did you find, like, when you were in high school or when you started college, you ever had a time where you thought, I should probably think more seriously about whether God is real? Or just sort of, not really?
See, this is another case where it's interesting because I started going to a Unitarian Universalist congregation when I was 11, and since then I have identified as UU.
Okay.
So...
because I'm not familiar with their beliefs, it's not really helping me right now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Are they atheists, I guess, is what I'm asking?
Really, it's everyone. Everyone of all faiths is welcome.
Okay.
It's more of a... Like when we go there, it's to question... It's more of just a journey for everyone to take together. A lot of the sermons borrow from wisdom of different religious traditions. Like we'll take from Christianity, from Judaism, from Islam, from Buddhism. And we generally just use that.
Even reading the text, like reading Leviticus or reading something from the Quran.
We'll use it to sort of like extract the wisdom and help give our lives context and meaning.
Yeah. And the way you might, I might, as I have, told my children the story of Icarus, where he, flew too close to the sun, wasn't supposed to fly too close to the water. His wings were going to give way and he'd fall. And it's just a great story to warn kids to not destroy my vehicle when they get behind them. So I might use a story like that. So it's sort of like that.
Yeah.
So in other words, there wouldn't really have been like an anti-Bible attitude in that group, I guess, because of it, right?
Yeah, there isn't really an anti-anything attitude. There are several atheists in our congregation.
Yeah.
And I would describe it as more of a humanist movement than anything else.
So there's several atheists. Are the majority atheists, or just more like,
It's hard to say because a lot of people will go for the sense of community, and they don't often engage in close discussion about the existence of a higher power. It's more that we have this sense of being like one humankind and one community.
But like the traditional idea of God, and I don't mean the idea of the Jehovah of the Bible or Allah of the Quran, like he's our God and only we get him. I mean the idea that there's the traditional philosophical concept of capital G God, the creator of the universe. Whether this God ever spoke is irrelevant to us, but this sort of, that like big question, were there times where you thought, I wonder if this, there is really a God that created the universe, not a Zeus. The Greeks never thought Zeus created the universe, right? So that kind of idea was...
Like the idea of a creator, and have I engaged with whether the creator exists or not?
Yes.
I would say no, not on any serious level. For me, in a more secular sense, the existence of an afterlife or of a creator, I would identify as agnostic because I'm open to the possibility. I'm open to whatever mysteries that we don't understand. But for me, I say, I know that I have this life. I have this one life, and I want to do good things with it. And I want to have an appreciation of that isn't derived from a belief in something more. So, for me, it's always seemed, I don't want to call it irrelevant, but for me, it seems irrelevant in the way that I live my life, because if there were an existence of that, it wouldn't change the way I'm living right now.
Are you familiar with the writer David Foster Wallace? You familiar with that writer? You are?
I think, wasn't he...
He committed suicide, tragically, around 2008 or 10 or something like that. But he's really interesting. He gave what often people refer to as the most, as the best commencement speech in history. And it's a really interesting speech. And he talks about like ultimate beliefs in ultimate things. And he talks about how incredibly difficult it is, no matter what your ultimate beliefs are, because everybody has some ultimate values. Not that everybody believes in God, but everybody has some ultimate thing that is like the most important thing that drives everything else. And he talks about how just crushingly difficult in daily life it is to keep this reality in front of you. And he says it really doesn't matter if that reality is God or just some important value that drives your life. That everybody struggles in, like, life has a way of just sucking out of you this belief because it's you don't see it in front of you, and yet you're trying to be driven by it. And I think that's really a common difficulty for both people who are religious or non-religious or wherever. And we all have some ultimate belief. I actually think he's right about that. It's very hard for people, which means that when we have moments where we're thinking about ultimate things, ultimate reality type things, ultimate values, that we have to sort of fight to think about them. It's very easy to not think about them. And yet reality is such that it kind of pushes in and it forces us to have to think about them whether we wanted to or not. And it's just a question of how long are we going to think about it and how seriously. And I think that's generally a right thing. I find for myself, I was an atheist all through middle school and high school. I thought about it, but I wouldn't say I was like every day thinking about it. I was every day thinking about other things that I wanted access to and to enjoy, and how could I get them, and what was in the way, and how could I get around it. And then every once in a while I'd have serious discussions while I'm drinking with my friends, and give my life philosophy or what have you of why I was an atheist. And but getting into college, I took classes where I was reading Greek philosophy, and there were things that made me think a lot more. I was in the military at one point, And I had to think differently, and I had to think about bigger things that I hadn't really quite been forced to think about. And that was actually sort of the atmosphere in which I started thinking more seriously about God, and eventually converted. Of course, I'm not now a Christian, but that's why I was asking you about it.
Okay.
You know, I was curious about how that's been for you, that experience. Your value system then, I mean, you obviously have values of things that you think are important and things that are important. Do you feel like they're just things that anybody who has common sense could be able to see these things? Or are they rooted in something else?
I think for me, the one thing that I have really appreciated that I've gotten from Unitarian Universalism is I value my spirituality now than I would have before. So I value asking these bigger questions and asking if I'm living a life that's in accordance with my values or what I find to be important. So I don't think that all of this is self-evident. I think that religion and spirituality and the path that you put yourself on is a very deeply personal thing. Yeah. So I think for me to say, obviously this is the way that you should be living your life. You should be, seizing the day and being mindful, and that's stuff that helps me. But I would never assume that it would help someone else automatically, because they're on their own path and they have their own truths that they feel are fitting for them. So are the SSA is obviously pretty pro-left. Yes. In its agenda, in its social agenda. So the people who wouldn't be for those things, would you feel like they're, it's just that's their private path and that's okay? Or would you feel like it's more like that's wrong? And I don't mean people who are just bigots. Right. I'm talking about people who might say, I really think marriage should be between a man and a woman, and that's all. Like, that's what I actually think it is right to do. But I'm not really trying to, go in and disrupt a gay marriage per se myself, Right. But would you feel like that's just sort of, that's okay then? I feel like with that kind of thing, if it's something that you believe, if you believe that marriage between a man and a woman is the right thing, then for you to follow that path for yourself is perfectly valid. I think as long as you aren't harming other people with your beliefs or trying to impose them in a harmful way, it's okay to have your own responses to. What do you think of the cake? I'm really curious about this. What do you think of the cake baking thing? Yeah, I don't really follow the details of that super closely. I did read some articles on it, but how, because obviously that was a person who, as I understand it, and I'm assuming the articles I read were fair-minded. So unless you read different ones that give a different version, it sounded like the cake baker was not really opposed to baking cakes for this gay couple. I can't remember if they were married, or they were going to get married, of course. But he did not want to do their wedding cake. So I think, as I understood it, he didn't really mind baking them cakes, but not the wedding cake. And I think he tried to suggest other places. So I'm curious, how you felt about it, or how you feel about it. I don't know very much about it either. Because the Supreme Court just ruled, like a week. I saw the ruling. And the ruling was viewed as very, very negative by the left. Right. So, and my gut reaction to it for sure is negative, because, for me, that kind of thing with, believing in marriage being purely heterosexual, for me that's a personal choice, and even for the baker to say, I don't want to make this wedding cake for you because you're homosexual, that's just wrong to me. Would you have felt the same, if a Jewish baker, somebody said, I'd like you to add pork for whatever reason? You know how donuts nowadays have wild things on them sometimes? I've seen Lucky Charms, sprinkled on it. Would you feel like it's okay, for the person who's Jewish to say, I don't think I don't want, I can't provide this for you. I can do all these other things, but I can't do that. Or would you feel like that's just... I'm not sure what like I don't know what restrictions they have, maybe
well, they can't
against
eat
like slaughter. Well, they
pork,
can't eat it themselves, but if they're...
I was only trying to say, I don't know, I didn't mean to say they would do that.
Okay.
I meant assuming some, like their own religious legitimate thing is they wouldn't do that. Would you feel like that would be wrong to demand it of them to do it? Like, because I would think it's kind of common sense to me that I don't want to take someone who's not supposed to deal with this in their religious or moral beliefs. Like, I wouldn't think I want to force them to do that. I would think I would just not expect that of them, and I would go somewhere else. Like, to me, that seems kind of common sense, and yet maybe I'm missing something.
I don't know. I mean, for me, at the very root of it is the baker wouldn't make the cake for them because they were homosexual, and to me that is discrimination. I
don't think this, maybe I misunderstood what you just meant, but he didn't have a problem baking cakes for them because they were
or
homosexual.
Making the wedding cake.
It was the wedding cake.
But even that in particular is
I mean, it was clearly against his like both of us could see. I'm not really. By the way, I'm really not trying to persuade you or anything. I'm curious. It's like we can both see that his conscience was a problem for him. Like, his conscience made him do something I don't think he wanted to try. Maybe I'm wrong, and he was a mean guy.
Yeah, I don't know anything personally about him.
But I myself, have had times where I would say I was asked to be a part of something that was really against my conscience in work, and I said I couldn't do it. But I hated having to say to somebody, I can't be a part of this, because I felt like I was being, either I could be viewed as lazy or I was mean or that whatever, and I didn't feel that way. I just didn't feel comfortable in my conscience doing it. Wasn't like I was against anybody, and I'm not saying he was that person. I'm just saying if that's all it was, would you feel like no, he still can't just let him do that?
It is a very touchy issue. You have to consider a lot of
Okay.
And I'm still myself.
You're still working through it.
I'm still working through it as well. I am also coming from a very biased standpoint because a lot of my friends are LGBT, and for that to happen to them would be.
It was
so
personally horrifying for you, just to think of them being treated, you would feel like you wouldn't want them to be treated that way.
And maybe this is me being insensitive to people that have faith and want to follow it. Yeah. But for me, he wasn't directly involved in the ceremony and in the wedding itself. He was making a wedding cake.
Yeah, it's farther down the line.
It's further removed than that. And you can make wedding cakes for anybody, and if he hadn't known that they were going to get married and that it was a homosexual wedding, he would have made the cake for them. Yeah. Listen,
I've asked Christian friends of mine, what if somebody wanted to have their divorce celebration cake, and you were a Christian and said you were really against divorce? Jesus said divorce basically was wrong. So would you feel like you shouldn't be a part of that?
Yeah, I feel like...
so I've asked that question of Christians to try and push them just like I'm pushing you.
Right.
Let me ask you a question that's a little different just because we've talked about that for a while. I really appreciate your response, actually. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
You talked about spirituality.
Yes.
You used the term. When you use the term, do you believe there really is a spiritual reality in the sense that just as there is the reality of gravity, a real thing that you and I don't see.
Like a tangible spirit.
Yeah, tangible is not the right word because gravity is not tangible. I just mean, when we talk about the material universe, gravity is a part of it.
Okay.
Is the when you say spirituality, is that a part of the material universe in your mind? In the sense that it's a real thing, in the universe, or is it something different from the universe, like God is different from the universe in traditional thinking, or is it neither?
I tend to think that when I have sort of grappled with a creator or creation in a limited way, to me the universe itself and the forces that control gravity and the way that things work, to me that is the higher power.
And are those things just mechanistic, mindless forces? Higher forces?
To me, yes. They are very much impartial.
It's not a will directing anything.
There is no will in the universe. There are forces that shape the way that it operates.
And those forces are detectable in the end?
They can be, yes.
Because pantheism, is a view where God is sort of a part of the universe.
Right.
Kind of directing, but not in any kind of personal way.
Maybe for me, God is the universe.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't...
But there aren't hidden spiritual forces indetectable to science.
I think that you can have, because I'm a neuroscience major, so I obviously think about cognition a lot.
Yeah.
And to me, the product, like your consciousness, your spirit, is something that is a result of physiological processes and the way that your brain is operating in the present moment in response to external stimuli, whatever's going on. I think that very much is shaped, and that is the result. If your brain was to be like shut off in any way, that would go away. But I don't think all of that, the scope of it, is detectable by like something purely scientific. Like my experience right now, I am the only one, or the thing that I'm perceiving to be me is the only thing in existence that is going to have this experience. Yeah. Okay. So
it's like it's a projection of some kind out of the physical.
Yeah, you can't.
The neuroscience.
You can't put that. You can't see that in data. You can see the synapses that are firing and lighting up. You can map the brain and say, okay, this area is activated, and this is the behavior that's coming out of it, and what others are perceiving you to be acting like. But you yourself only, and I think that that's sacred. So I think there are things that are sacred in the universe, and even if they are created by things that are material and tangible and very scientific, I still find them to be...
So spiritual is being used in a way that's more like material things that have higher value than other things. Yeah, I think... Like, do you believe humans are more valuable than animals? It's a yes or no question, not to trap you.
Okay, it's a yes or no question?
Just teasing you. It was a yes or no question, but I'm just having fun with you.
I'd say yes, or maybe I just find them more interesting because I'm biased, I'm a human, and I think that the capabilities that we have, like we have we have a lot more prefrontal cortical matter than any other animal, and seeing the results of that and seeing what we can do is amazing.
The capacities,
I mean, obviously, are amazing. So in that sense, yes, I would say that we are quote unquote better than just any other animals that exist right now.
But you hesitated a little bit.
Yeah.
Why? Because it seems kind of obvious to most people, I think, that humans seem above animals, and even I think more valuable, like actually intrinsically more valuable. But you hesitated.
Our chapter of Secular Alliance, we had a talk once on consciousness and what it means to be conscious, and it's very hard to come to a conclusion about that because, you look at little insects that have microscopic brains pretty much, and they're very much mechanical. Like, they're little machines, and they go about, and they live and they die. And we do the same things, but are we more sentient? Like, what does sentience mean? And what does that mean for AI and a bunch of other things? It's just
it could get very complicated. Okay, so let's talk about what you think is the best argument for God you've heard. Okay, and let me give you some time to think about this, because let me tell you why I'm asking you this. I asked Christian friends of mine, what's the best argument for atheism? They've never thought about it. Because usually the way people think is, well, those are the wrong people. So why would I even bother thinking about the idiocy, of what they think? So, and I mean this of both sides. It's kind of like, why would I think seriously about that? And the reason I ask the question is because I think of it as it's a good way to test even yourself. I feel this as a test. Am I really listening to the arguments from the other side? Right. And if I am, I will weigh them. And some will seem better to me than others. And if I'm not doing any of that, then I need to be honest with myself and say I really haven't thought about that. Okay. And that, which, by the way, would mean I haven't thought much about it.
I think part of what it is no one has really come to me with an argument for God's existence. Whenever I've gone into, because I've gone to Catholic services before, and when I was going to the UU congregation back in Virginia, part of our youth group experience, going through high school was to go to different churches. So we obviously went to Christian churches, we went to a Buddhist monastery, we went to a synagogue, we went and exposed ourselves to many different faiths.
Yeah.
And that is an experience I treasure. I love learning about that kind of thing. The thing about that is I feel like a lot of the time those sermons are like when you go to church for a service, the service is meant for people that are already subscribed to that religion.
Sure.
So a lot of the time there is no, pushing forward of this is why there's a God. You assume that everyone else is on the same page,
right.
and then you go off of that. And one of the reasons I never really engaged with Christianity is because a lot of what the Bible was saying, or the way that it was being interpreted and being applied to people's lives, specifically with I guess Jesus is New Testament, right?
Yes.
Yeah, specifically with the New Testament and Jesus and the different stories, and this is what this means, and this is what you should be doing in accordance with this.
Right.
That kind of thing, the morals behind that, or the reasoning behind it, with humans being original sin and that kind of thing. I don't think that humans are. I think humans are inherently good. So I think that whole message of Christianity, I was never able to engage with that, and it alienated me. And every time I went and sat in on a service that was teaching this, I said, I don't like
Just
this.
right from the start, there was no reason to think it would take it seriously.
So I never even came in. I was never, forgive me for using this word, I was never indoctrinated to have belief in a higher power and think, you need to do this to live in accordance with this higher power. So for me to come in and for them to say, this is the right way to live, and for me not to have this idea of, I need to do this because this is the way this is the way the universe works. There is a higher power. You have to do this. This is the system. I was able to come at it with a more critical view and think, this doesn't really have a place in my life and what I value. But so
that's a really. I think that's actually a very articulate answer.
Yeah.
Do you so?
Can you give me an argument for?
I could, but I mean, let me ask you this: you said you thought people were inherently good. I mean, you must think some people don't seem like they're very inherently good. You could at least acknowledge this, correct?
I think that some people are sick.
Okay.
In fact, a lot of I don't agree with a lot of our practices regarding prisons in this country. I think that people can be rehabilitated.
Yeah. So I think I get what you mean by inherently sick, meaning that in proper rehabilitation they would leave murder or whatever.
And sometimes that's not the case, and there is evil in the world.
Socrates. Plato presents Socrates, of course, this way as being all sin is just a lack of education, essentially a lack of knowledge,
or even just a pursuit of our animal instincts, or just the way that we've been shaped growing up, our prejudices, when we're being taught to hate other people based on skin color or sex or
wouldn't you think?
orientation.
I think some people who've become murderers, really not just in a fit of rage, but actual serial murderers, have had parents that seemed pretty normal and never would have even remotely tried to push that kind of attitude. So, but you would just take the view that they're sick. So as far as I just was curious about what you meant by it. I do not think of people as inherently good. And when I read Plato, it was the one part that I was like, But at the same time, I think there's probably some common ground we would have. I really think, and I believe God made the world good. I would think you would want to look at some arguments for God. There's lots of sources that are biased by religion. Yeah. Aristotle's formation of his argument for God was totally irreligious, and so it would seem like that would be an interesting place to start. What was Aristotle's argument for God? Could be probably a 10-minute YouTube video from. There's a philosophy YouTube channel that is awesome for these kinds of things. I find it very reliable. If you want, we can get a link for you, because it's not from a Christian perspective. It's not from any religious perspective. They're philosophers, but you get introduced to the arguments. And interestingly, Aristotle's actual argument has nothing to do with the beginning of the universe. His argument is that at every single moment, our universe wouldn't exist apart from God. And when I try to tell people the real best argument for God from a philosophical perspective, I would say is that argument. It has nothing to do with the beginning of the universe. It has to do with every instant. And it's really impressive if you try to understand what Aristotle meant by it. It really is an interesting argument. If nothing else, you should pursue it just for its interest.
Yeah, I'm interested in reading this.
Because it's not the one you hear from Christians. It's not the one you hear from people that are on YouTube giving arguments for God. It's a very different, nuanced philosophical argument. And I think it's really powerful. So there you go.
All right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
It's been fantastic talking to you.
Yeah.